I saw the information. I read the information outside of that meeting. It's all fake news. It's phony stuff. It didn't happen. And it was gotten by opponents of ours.
President-elect, Mr. President-elect, since you are attacking our news organization, can you give us a chance?
Your organization
You are
is
attacking
terrible.
our news organization.
Your organization
Can you give us a
is
chance
terrible.
to ask a question, sir?
Go ahead. I think it's a disgrace. And I say that, and I say that. And that's something that Nazi Germany would have done and did do. I think it's a disgrace. That information that was false and fake and never happened got released to the public. As far as BuzzFeed, which is a failing pile of garbage, writing it, I think they're going to suffer the consequences. They already are. Does anyone really believe that story? I'm also very much of a germaphobe, by the way. Believe me.
There we go. He doesn't like Germans either. Anyway, we're joined now by the Foreign Affairs analyst, Tim Marsh, a good friend of this programme, and by Ted Malloch, the man who's expected to be Donald Trump's ambassador to the EU. Some said to Britain, but it looks like the EU has won. Is that true?
I was in New York last week discussing it, but can't be confirmed until it comes from his mouth.
OK, very well. Tim Marshall, let me start with you. Let's look at the provenance of this stuff, that particular stuff that BuzzFeed has been publishing. A company in Washington called Fusion GPS, started by a journalist from the Wall Street Journal, is hired by a billionaire Republican to gather dirt on Donald Trump to stop him becoming the Republican candidate. That fails.
Yes.
A bunch of rich Democrats then pick up the contract from Fusion GPS because they want to stop him becoming president of the United States. The information is provided largely or compiled largely by a former British intelligence officer called Steele. This is paid for information that we cannot verify. Was it right to publish it?
Probably not. And people that are desperate to believe it and want to believe it, especially the most lurid allegations, which is what has garnered all the attention, are desperate to believe it. And so I think their suspension of disbelief is suspended. Let me tell you a very quick story. Young reporter, 30, first time in Moscow, knock on the door, 1 o'clock in the morning. It was a young Natasha. And I knew exactly what was going on. So I closed the door with her on the outside of it. Because the way they work is that they try to get you on camera when you're young, and if you become a senior reporter, they've got something on you. Now, I knew that at 30 years old. Do I really believe that Donald Trump would be in a Moscow hotel suite, acting in that manner in his 60s when he knows about how the world works? No, I don't. So if that doesn't add up, a lot of the other things don't add up. So bringing you to the question, Andrew, about being published, it was doing the rounds. What gave it some credibility was when it was distilled down into 2 pages, and the authorities thought that, well, we need to show it to the president and the president-elect, and that opened the floodgates. I can understand it being published, but I just ask people that view things through their utter dislike of Mr. Trump, which, forgive me, some of which I share, future ambassador to the EU, some of which I share.
Yet to be confirmed.
Yet to be confirmed.
Or the UK.
I do, I'm not a Trump fan, but I just ask people to look at this story not through the prism of their dislike of this man, but through the prism of its reliability. And if it was exactly the same thing about Mr. Obama, wouldn't you be thinking, this looks dodgy?
Well, that's what Mr. Trump did with Mr. Obama when he tried to make out he wasn't born in the United States. So, let me
he did a whole bunch
to...
of things like that, and he's playing by the sword and he's dying by it. But that doesn't make the allegations against him right.
No, I understand all that. Let me come to the presumptive ambassador of somewhere. I mean, it could be Moldova, you never know.
If you're lucky.
Is this damaging?
Yeah, that's a story.
Is this damaging Donald Trump?
I think quite the opposite, actually.
Do you? Why is
He's
that?
used it to his advantage. I mean, yesterday, it was an incredible news conference, press conference. And he comes out the winner. He looks confident, he looks robust, he defends himself, and he actually proves that the news media, at least some part of it, is trying to delegitimize his presidency, his election, and it's doing it by the use of fake news.
If it's not fake news, and we don't know,
Let me tell you what the British intelligence told me this morning.
Okay.
This person, who they know, who was an MI6...
This is Mr. Steele.
It is Christopher Steele. was also an FBI asset at one point in time, so he has intelligence background, but he was paid by the people that you mentioned who were working for Jeb Bush in order to discredit him. The Democrats took over the contract, as you said. He kept adding to the dossier and using information given to him by the FSB in Russia, most of it fabricated. The more he put into the dossier, the more he got paid. So he made a sensationalist dossier as fat as possible, just like your lawyer charges you more billable hours in order to get paid more.
You said most of it fabricated. What bit wasn't fabricated?
I don't know what's fabricated and what's not. Obviously,
So you don't know if most of it's fabricated.
Well, I mean, the stuff that we've read, the salacious stuff that we've read, is
But some of it might be true.
Well, it is true that Mr. Trump was in Moscow to
For the Miss
date.
Universe contest.
Well, you know, these kinds of things are true, is what I'm
Right.
suggesting.
Okay. Why? It's interesting what British intelligence has been saying here. Why was Mr. Steele so keen to get this out? Because he went to inordinate lengths. As I understand it, he even sent it to Senator McCain, no friend of Donald Trump. He was touting it around. And then suddenly he says, gosh, I have to disappear. The Kremlin could now be after me. I mean, if he's a former MI6 agent, he would have worked that out.
Well, Steele knew Litvinenko, apparently, and we know what happened to Litvinenko.
And that was the man killed, murdered in
by
London
polonium,
with the polonium.
poison. And, you know, it is an odd state. Yes, he took it to the former FBI man who took it to McCain. Now, you can justify this in that if he genuinely feels, look, this is the stuff that's swirling around about the future leader of the free world, it is necessary that the administration knows this stuff is swirling around and knows that this is what people are saying. I think it is legitimate to have passed that on. It's legitimate for James Clapper to pass it on to
let me ask you about that, Tim, because was it legitimate to be done in the way it was done?
No. Well,
the intelligence services in America had a report for the president, which they were also going to share with Mr. Trump, and I believe parts of the Congress too, which was their best intelligence on Russia's involvement in the US election.
Yes.
And that they believe was authenticated. It was their work. They stood by it. It was a proper intelligence briefing for the Oval Office. To that, they attached a 2-page summary of Mr. Steele's 35-page report, which they don't know is whether it's just gossip, tittle-tattle, or anything. Did that not, as the Washington Post, no friend of Mr. Trump this morning, as the Washington Post says, that devalues the intelligence that the president is getting?
And the New York Times has a similar approach to this. I'm saying you can make the case that if this stuff is swirling around, they need to be aware of it. And when you're at the very, very top, you only know as much as the people below you tell you. You often don't know about this stuff. But there were two things yesterday that were really overlooked. One was Trump completely shifted and said, I think it was the Russians that hacked originally. That's a shift. And the other one is the Rex Tillerson, incoming Secretary of State, evidence to the House, where his attitude to the Senate, was so far away from all the things that Donald Trump has said about Russia that we've either got a complete disconnect between the Secretary of State and the incoming president, or we actually saw the real US policy towards Russia, which was much more robust.
And particularly against China, but I want to come back to that in a minute. Michael, how this sort of thing must have happened to you every day when you were Home Secretary and leader of Her Majesty's opposition?
My memory must be playing me false. I can't quite bring it to mind. I'm sure you'll remind me of
We've got the dossier here.
I'm sure you have.
What do you make of it all?
Look, I very much agree with what Tim's been saying. It may be highly entertaining stuff in a way. It's not much to do with us. This man...
As the United Kingdom.
Us in the United Kingdom. This man, in 8 days' time, is going to be president of the most powerful country in the world. He's going to be president of our most important ally. We've got to do what we can to build good relations with the new administration, to try and influence them where we can. That's what we in this country should be focusing on.
But there is a serious undertone to some of this, and that is that we know now from the BBC's Paul Wood, who's been very well informed in all this, that on October the 15th, the US Secret Intelligence Court, the FISA court, had issued a warrant to investigate 2 Russian banks. It had to do this because the CIA had discovered this, but of course the CIA is not allowed theoretically to operate in the United States itself. So it joined with the FBI and other agencies to investigate if Russian money went into the Trump campaign. This is an ongoing investigation, a warrant issued by the US FISA court. If that was true, it would be illegal and a major problem for Mr. Trump.
Well, it sounds so. I don't know that it's been corroborated or proven yet. I mean,
No, it's being investigated, is
has
what
been,
I'm saying.
and there are constant investigations about foreign entities dabbling in American.
Because they're not allowed to finance US elections.
That's correct. It doesn't matter which government. And, you know, this has happened in previous elections where we've discovered after the fact that some governments have had to, tried to have influence. So that would be very untoward and quite illegal.
So it would be dangerous for Mr. Trump if that turned out to be true.
Certainly. I mean, again, these hypotheticals, it would be dangerous if the
But it's
Chinese
not-
did it or the North Koreans did it or anyone did
It's
it.
not a hypothetical in the sense, we don't know if it happened,
Right.
but it's not hypothetical in the sense that there are 6 US agencies involved in this investigation and a US court has issued a warrant. There is some thought, trying to step back from the lurid detail, that what is going on here is that all our emphasis is on Russia and Mr. Trump's relationship or attitudes to Russia, whereas the real story is his hardline attitude to China. And that came out in the Tillerson hearings yesterday.
And that is actually probably more important. Look, if all these allegations are true, then they are devastating, they are important. It's just that I don't see any reason to believe them, so it's fascinating tittle-tattle and everyone can have a good joke about it. But the substantive stuff is exactly what you say. Policy on Russia, which Mr. Tillerson laid out yesterday, and policy on China. We may well be heading for, and I say we, a major trade war with China. Protectionism led by the Trump administration. Now, they will both lose. The Chinese will lose more, but the Americans will lose as well, and then we will lose if they have a trade war. And that's the tough stuff. And the Chinese, we're also worried about the Russian battalions on the Estonian border. We should also be worried about what the Americans and Chinese are doing. Yesterday, the Chinese aircraft carrier sailed very close to Taiwan.
Yes.
Not within its waters, but within its air identification zone. Now, that was a deliberate pushback to the Americans. The Taiwanese scrambled their jets and their ships and went out to see them. Again, they're sending signals, but it's that sort of signal, and I think even more importantly, more likely, the trade war, that's the stuff that's going to actually impact our lives.
President Obama told us at the start of the referendum campaign that the way forward for trade deals were multilateral, regional bloc trade deals, and that if Britain left the EU, we'd be at the back of the queue for a bilateral deal. Could I suggest to you that he was wrong on both accounts, that the future now is back to bilateral deals? The Trans-Pacific deal is over. TTIP, the North Atlantic deal, is all but over. The French elections will probably kill it dead. And that bilateral deals are back in vogue.
Oh, and there's one more thing you can add. Since
Are we at the front of the queue?
I've said all this in print. Indeed.
Have you?
The UK is now at the front of the queue.
Oh,
Oh, all right.
heard it here first.
Good news?
It is good news if it happens, and I hope it will. But Tim is right. If the Trump administration plunges the world into the kind of protectionism we saw in the 1930s,
Indeed, which was a Republican administration that did that.
This would be disastrous for the whole world economy and disastrous for us as well as for the United States and China.
Okay.
Would you like to work with Nigel Farage, by the way?
Would I like to work with him? I'm not a UK citizen. I don't belong to a political party here.
Well, he's not an American citizen, but he thinks he can get a job there.
That
You were
doesn't
meeting
seem-
him
that
today,
do-
you know?
That doesn't seem likely either.
Were you meeting him today?
I have had conversations with him on numerous occasions, actually, yes. But
Wherever you're ambassador of, will you come back and speak to us?
I'll be glad to. I watch your show.
Oh, along with the Queen.
Will you also pass on, because the Labour leader here, Jeremy Corbyn, has repeated his offer to Donald Trump to visit a London mosque with him if and when he comes over?
Well, I think that'll be a very high priority. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Now,